Have you ever heard someone say, I'm so uncoordinated? And maybe you've felt that about yourself. Well, that feeling of being discombobulated, uncoordinated is actually something that you can improve. Everybody can. We can work on coordination. And that's really what essential number 7 is all about. Essential number 7 starts with upper and lower follow one another. But here's the fleshed out statement. Movement should be rooted in the feet, stabilized through the legs, commanded by the waist, and expressed through the hands. When the movement of the feet, legs, waist, and hands are in unison, then intention will follow in the eyes. This is regarded as the complete coordination of above and below. If one of these is missing, the movement becomes fragmented. So let's talk about it a little bit. Let me put my cheat sheet down. And when we think about coordination of movement, that really makes things at the bottom level, it makes it more effective, right? If you think about a punch, if all I do is this, right? It's actually not a very effective movement. I mean, there's only so much strength I can have in that, so much reach. I'm limited by my body in that. Whereas if I use all of my body rooted in my feet, stabilized through my legs, actually using my Dantian, now all of a sudden I can have a very powerful punch because I'm allowing that energy to flow all the way out to be expressed through the hands. So that is a much more effective movement. It's also a much more efficient movement because I'm not wasting energy by just trying to punch as hard as I can. I actually have that energy flowing through my body, being able to be rooted and grounded and use that energy from the ground to be expressed through the hands. Remember, we talked about last week about not being stagnant. When we're open and loose, that energy can flow, and that's important. That's what we're talking about with being stabilized through the legs, rooted through the feet, stabilized, commanded by the waist. This is an interesting point. When you think about power lifters, if you think about the snatch where they have the big barbell and they're here and they bring it all the way up, if they're not utilizing the ground force, if they're not rooted by their feet, stabilized through the legs, and then they transfer that power from the bottom to the top to let that bar come all the way up. This is a totally coordinated movement of upper and lower following one another, using that energy and being commanded by what we call this transfer case. Your Dantian is actually where that energy is being transferred. Think about pushing chi, right? If we do pushing chi, the intent of this is to push your opponent away, right? You want to use the energy to push your opponent away. If you take that movement and examine it, I'm rooted in my feet, stabilized through my leg, and I can use that energy of my whole body transferred from the Dantian into my hands. Whereas if I were to actually make that movement uncoordinated, do it opposite, and if I were to try to push something open and yet go backwards with my lower body and push into the opponent or the door, that's not effective, it's not efficient, it's not going to work, right? That's not a coordinated whole body movement. I want to turn towards the mirror now because I want to do repulse the monkey. If you think about putting your left foot forward, your left hand in front, your right hand to the side, as we bring that right hand up, our left foot becomes empty. We step back and we use this transfer case to turn and repulse the monkey. We're balanced, we're coordinated. But let's take it in an uncoordinated fashion. Again, bringing that left hand forward, right hand. Just bring that right hand up. And now finish the upper body movement, but don't do the lower body movement. This is very uncoordinated. It's also very uncomfortable, right? To do this and then step backwards is not an effective movement. It's also not efficient. You're wasting energy by feeling that very uncomfortable moment. It's not balanced. It doesn't work. If now we think about bringing that right hand up and over, at the moment where we need to be pushing, right, we have this coordination of stepping back, using our dantian, and pushing our opponent away. We also need to think about, as we talked about last week, using consciousness, not strength. Remember, that was all about mind and intent. And in our essential number 7, it talked about when we have that coordination of the body, then the intent is also involved with the eyes. And what does that mean? Is obviously you can understand awareness through your brain, but if you think about your repulse the monkey, right? As you bring this coordination of your body, if your eyes are not where they should be, right, that's not going to be a balanced position. Let's think about actually a different movement. Let's do brush knee. If we were to do brush knee and we look behind like this, my energy is not actually going into my opponent. If I'm looking behind, it's hard to put anything forward. My eyes need to be on that opponent. I need to have my mind and intent coordinated with my body. All of this comes together. Wave hands like clouds. When we first teach wave hands like clouds, I like to break it down because these are new people. They're not used to this movement. So I break it apart completely, where I talk about your right hand does a clockwise circle. And now instead of moving just from your arm, let's move from the dantian. Let's get the torso involved and start that circle with your dantian. And then I take the left hand and I say, let's draw that counterclockwise circle. So I've broken apart the hands when I do that. I've introduced movement from the dantian, but I've really broken. The right arm is doing clockwise, the left arm is doing counterclockwise. And then I say, let's do it together. You'll start that right hand with your clockwise movement, and then your left hand with that counterclockwise movement. And for a brand new person, that's the easiest way for them to start to figure out one hand going one way, one hand going the opposite way, because that's actually quite hard for your brain to think about. But eventually, as you mature in your Tai Chi, you need to learn to coordinate that movement by utilizing the dantian, this transfer case, thinking about upper and lower following one another. What's really happening with wave hands like clouds is the body is moving in unison. The body is moving in a coordinated fashion. It's not two arms moving like this. It's actually moving from the Dantian and allowing those arms to relax. Remember, we talk about how if we use the Dantian, relaxation can occur so much easier. Think about moving with your wave hands like clouds, not only just the rotation, but remember the substantial and insubstantial as we step out and our Dantian comes over that base of support. That allows us to be balanced. So we're coordinating the upper and lower, so that allows us to be relaxed. It allows us to move with balance. It allows us to be more effective in our movement. Part the wild horse's mane is very similar to wave hands like clouds in that we're moving our body, opening up with that rotation. I had a student just this week that she was doing her part the wild horse's mane, but what was happening was she was moving this arm before she was moving from here and stepping out and rotating into it. Now that might not seem so incorrect, and really don't think of it as incorrect, but think of it as not coordinated. And if we can coordinate that movement, it becomes much more effective. Because what we want is the upper and lower to follow one another. This Dantian, moving our body open, is what needs to happen with part the wild horse's mane. It's coordination of that movement. If we were to approach an opponent and do this first and then step out, there's no power in that. There's no coordination. It's not efficient. It's not effective. When we allow our body to be rooted, stabilized, commanded, then that energy can be expressed through the hands into the opponent. Fair Lady Works the Shuttle is also one that's easy to see if you're doing it without coordinating your movement. If you were to block something coming at you, think about Fair Lady as a high block here. Something high, something from on high is coming down towards your head. If you were to try to block it just like this, there's really no strength in that. This hand makes no difference at this point. Something coming down at you has the force of gravity in its favor. You're not going to have enough strength here. However, if you coordinate that movement, stabilize it, rooted, stabilized through the legs, now you have power in that motion. You can't do Fair Lady Works the Shuttle without coordinating your upper and your lower. Unison does not necessarily mean things happen all at the same time. It doesn't mean you have to coordinate like this. When we step out, I'm stabilizing. I can do this high block first and then come through with my punch. Because that's not in unison doesn't mean it's not coordinated. It is upper and lower following one another. It is an effective movement just like this. Let's do the ward off sequence and think about it in terms of stabilized, rooted through the feet, stabilized through the legs, commanded by the waist, and then expressed through the hands. Taking a nice deep breath in here. As we step out, the Dantian leads this motion. It's coordinating our upper and lower body. Our hands just follow what the Dantian is saying, coordinating by allowing the Dantian to be the leader, allows our motion to be effective. It also allows it to be relaxed. It allows the energy to flow. If we're all bound up, as we talked about last week, it's not efficient. You're wasting energy. If I just try to muscle my way through that, I'm not in a good position in a fight. I have to actually allow my whole body to have the power and let that energy be relaxed to be released into my opponent. Let your Dantian lead. Pushing chi. Let's do it on the other side. Bringing your weight over to the right, back to the left, stepping out. Dantian leads. That energy is expressed through the hands. And then the hands follow where the Dantian is leading as we roll back. They follow as we rotate and press. They follow when we pull back and when we push into our opponent. Think about adding one more time with the ward off sequence. If our eyes are not involved in that energy flow, the intent of what we're doing, if I try to ward off like this and I look behind, I've broken my columns. I'm not in a good position at all. I'm not in a relaxed position either. If I'm looking this direction and I'm looking this way and I'm not really following what's happening, you can see how that disconnect of your eyes and the intent and the coordination of your body, everything has to be integrated in order for it to be powerful, in order for it to be coordinated, in order for it to actually do what you want it to be doing. And when we do Tai Chi, remember we do it for the benefits. We do it because it helps our body. And if we can practice coordination, if we can work on coordinating our upper and lower following one another, we'll actually be able to move with more balance, which will help us avoid falling. It'll help us avoid injuries. If we practice the coordination of our movement, we'll actually learn how to open up and be more relaxed, allowing that blood to flow better, allowing the oxygen to flow better. Thinking about our mind and intent of we want to be healthier. We can practice our coordination with Tai Chi, and that's going to give us the benefit of a healthier life.